welcome back to the Earth on Survival Guide, a podcast for novices and masters alike. I am Dan. My co-host is, of course, Josh.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second half of the longest year ever.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things Earth Dawn magical, mechanical, non-typical, and probably cyclical as we get into some emails here, another email palooza, half episode probably, and then we'll work on everybody's circling up questions.
We'll try to avoid the 20-minute sidebar.
No, we enjoy those.
No,
we enjoy those. I enjoy those. I like it when Josh rants.
Yeah, I going back and listening
better Josh
to the
than me, I'll tell you that. If I ranted, it would all be like expletives.
Yeah, I realized that I kind of like come back again to get to the same point, so I like maybe try and dial that back a little bit.
It's okay. Again, better you than me, because if I did it, it would all be like expletive laden, and that would not be fun for anyone to listen to.
Oh yeah, well when I break out the profanity, you know there is absolutely.
It's done. It's over. Bing! Josh has hit the limit. Cross the line. We're all good. It's okay. So let's just jump into the emails because time is a-wasting. So we have 4 or 5 to get to, and Kagorsi, we're going to save yours for last, so just bear with us for the rest of the questions coming in. So this one comes in from Steven, who loves the podcast. Just wondering if you have some tips on converting first edition adventures to 4th. He was thinking of running a couple for the old adventures for his group. I think we might have covered this a little bit
have,
previously.
I think, touched on this briefly, in one other episode. My general...
So where you been? No, I'm kidding.
It's fine. It's a good question.
It always is.
My general idea is to take a look at stuff that's in the Game Master's Guide that is of like the appropriate challenge rating, and choose something that is, roughly equivalent to the critter that you might be replacing.
Yeah.
And use those stats rather than, for example, this encounter, like the first encounter in Mists of Betrayal is in the original first edition version of it is a Jehuthra, which in 4th edition stats is a rough novice party encounter.
Yeah.
And I think 3rd edition or classic, like in their reprint, changed it to like a giant spider of some sort. The other thing that you could potentially do is, if you've got the companion, is to grab masks, like the small or there are a couple of size-based masks that actually lower the difficulty of an opponent, so you could use those as well. I know, for example, and a lot of this will depend on what circle group your group is, but on Morgan's blog, he did like an update of the Mist from Mists of Betrayal to like play around with some ideas that he has been working on as far as developing like boss encounters, because we've talked in the past about how the creatures in the book aren't really designed to be a single boss encounter for a group. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those are some things I would look at them as sort of plot framework, and then using appropriately scaled stat blocks from 4th edition with, skinned onto whatever creature you think is appropriate. Yeah.
And the formula that we mentioned a couple podcasts ago is right in the beginning of the Game Master's Guide, right before the creature encounters, use this formula to use the appropriate legend points, or not the legend points, sorry, the appropriate steps for what your party can actually do.
To basically compare compare the difficulty, challenge, potential, roughly speaking, how easy or difficult the encounter might be based on comparing attack steps to defenses and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that whole right there in the Game Master's Guide, beautifully done. Best place to find it. So thank you, Stephen. Keep listening. We'll have more for you later on. So a longer email comes in from Matty S., First Circle Game Master, he says, the PS is, feel free to disregard if it's too silly. There is no too silly a question. We'll take care of you. Thanks for producing and releasing the podcast. I found it so interesting and entertaining that I have been motivated to start a Earth Dawn 4th edition campaign myself.
Yay.
Welcome to the fold, Matty.
That's awesome.
My background story within the game is not long at all, having won my first rulebooks during the Shadowcasters Network fundraising raffle of 2018. Though he'd been aware of this concept for years, but this makes his a minority in the audience. He hadn't been indoctrinated to Earthdawn like the rest of us have. So the campaign he'll be running, first playing session next week. He's excited. Has attracted only 2 players to the table, an elven cavalryman and a windling illusionist. And he'll be adding an orc weaponsmith as a GM player character. No groans from us, at least. He says maybe from everybody else, but just to bring up the numbers a little bit. So which brings to the questiononical part of his correspondence. Thank you for the CAL word. Would either of you be so kind as to share some game mastering tips for managing Earthdawn with a very small party size and not having it end in tears for any involved?
That is difficult. Cavalrymen, we talked about the cavalrymen a few episodes ago, and without the, if they're in a situation where they won't have their mount, that gets even tougher because they lose a lot of their ideal tricks. Having a support NPC as a weaponsmith is good. They can make a decent sort of support fighty character. Yeah, you're just going to need to be a little bit careful in terms of the opposition that you're going to be throwing at the group. With a cavalryman and a weaponsmith and an illusionist, your heavy hitter is the cavalryman. The illusionist has some direct damage potential, but is better suited to buffing, like with Monstrous Mantle is sort of the ideal support spell for the illusionist because it gives enhanced defense ratings and damage bonuses and things like that. So that's something that you'd be looking at. Yeah, It's just a matter of making sure that the opposition that you are putting up against them when it comes to combat situations is maybe even being a little bit generous to the characters in terms of like comparing the balance of attributes and steps and things like that. And especially you're going to want to be careful with how many enemies that they go up against. That's the big problem with any kind of small group is
overwhelming them with numbers.
Is overwhelming them with numbers, and having an illusionist, or magician of any kind that doesn't have a really solid front line to get behind can be a little bit tough. So when I ran the one shot for the Crit Show folks a couple of months back, I think I might have mentioned this, that we had a troubadour, a weaponsmith, an elementalist, and a thief.
A thief? Okay.
Was the 4th one. And so, the thief, as we talked about in the thief episode, can, with the right build, have some striker high damage combat capability. The weaponsmith, if built a certain way, can kind of act as a frontline fighter. But that's a group where they said, these are the characters we want to play. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I need to rethink a little bit the opposition that I'm going to be putting against them because I need to make the characters that are going to be the fighters able to do that effectively, but not having a lot of the tricks that swordmasters and warriors and stuff have. And also just maybe scale back the opposition a little bit so that I'm not necessarily overwhelming them just in terms of the raw numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that, especially if you're a new game master in general, I would always err on the side of giving the characters the benefit of the doubt and giving them a little bit of an edge, and being sort of upfront. And I imagine if they're kind of coming new to it as well, you're all kind of discovering and figuring it out together. Some advice that was given in a recent sort of like writing advice podcast that I listened to was don't be afraid to fail.
Totally.
Try it out. You might make mistakes. You might, run into some issues, but you learn by making mistakes and figure that out. You may as well want to look at having things be slanted a little bit more towards social and puzzle type interactions, although that kind of leaves out the cavalrymen a little bit in terms of what they can do. So yeah, it's a tough situation. That is a group that could be a little bit rough.
There are also some shards previously published that are rather short, meant for novice characters, that are pretty quick. I've been running a group once a week. I have a new player who's a nurse, and so I'm giving her downtime from all of her COVID duties. So I'm running her and another friend or two once a week, and party's only 2 or 3. On the best days, 3 people, but I'm running the shortest, lowest level shards that I possibly can, and I'm adjusting as necessary. So read one of those. They're available on FosseGames.com, and I'm not pumping in a product seriously. I'm trying to help you out as a game master. Find one of those, like Journey to Lang, the Tomb of King Runeveer. Those are pretty short and pretty light, and so you can kind of gauge your party's capabilities off of that and kind of build up, okay, this is the type of thing that they liked, did not like. You can blame whoever wrote it instead of yourself, and then you can kind of learn from there just to go, okay, they don't like this kind of care delving. They want something more out in the open where he can run free and the Windling can fly along. And so that might just be they're a wandering duo traveling the land of Barsave, and there's happen to be the next town the next day, like episodes of Kung Fu. How'd you get there? Who cares? You're just in the next town the next day. Ta-da! There you are. And that's it. So maybe try that out as well, just as a little nudge. Just, I don't know.
Yeah, and actually, another thing that if you're gonna maybe be looking to like a episodic series kind of thing, like Kung Fu or something along those lines, is to have, like you mentioned, they mentioned the Orc Weaponsmith NPC that they're going to bring along as sort of like a regular companion.
Yeah.
You could have, depending on what's going on in the various adventures, have like guest stars, like other NPCs that show up to help just for that adventure. And don't necessarily like stick around long term, so that they can maybe help provide a little bit of support for stuff, and even not necessarily like rolling them out as a full-blown participant in the combat, but if like a town that they're at has some guards, maybe have the guards go along with them to the encounter, and there can be, say, rooting out a ghoul nest. Like, you could have that there are, like, 8 ghouls, but you don't need to have the player characters fight all 8. You could have the guards or whatever tie up a few of them and, kind of do that sort of thing. That's actually, if you look at Masks of Fear in the Quick Start Guide, there are a couple of the NPCs that the group is going along with at that point that are there at the final fight. The idea is that they go off and they're kind of doing their own thing, that they can, come in to help if the player characters get in over their head, or if things go really well for the player character group, they might get slightly overwhelmed and give you another lever to kind of, or dial to tweak to kind of scale things in the middle of the encounter, rather than like rolling out all of the dice, just kind of have it be narratively going on to enhance the scene and do that kind of thing. That's a possibility as well.
Yeah. So err on the side of your players first, and then see what the balance is. But otherwise, Maddie, not a silly question.
No, not at all. That is a
new game masters, new players. That's what we're here for.
It's a good question, and a problem that as an experienced game master, I kind of hear that and I go, "Oh boy, that is a poser." I would have to think about that a little bit.
Yes. But by all means, contact us again. Let us know how it goes. And if we can answer any more questions for you, we're happy to do so. Next up, Aaron. Afternoon, guys. First off, he wants to thank us for pointing him in the direction of the Earth Dawn Guild to pick up a new online group. He's now joined up with the Circle of Dawn and have played a couple of sessions already. So he's apparently one of the Circle of Dawn players.
Yeah, we talked about them a week or two ago.
Yeah. And while on the subject, thanks for the mention in the Thief episode. All credit to Stephen for the effort he's put in so far. My question is about Obsidian Life Rocks mainly. First, should we be expecting an Obsidian episode soon?
Yes.
Episode 40.
Episode 40?
Because 35 is... Because if anyone has figured out the pattern, about every 5 episodes we cover a race. 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So 35, because it's coming up soon, is going to be on Trolls, and 40 is Obsidian.
Okay.
So yes, it's coming soon. We have it planned.
It is coming. We have it planned, yes.
It's in the works.
Agenda. You'll just have to wait a few more weeks.
Exactly. Secondly, is there a list of Life Rocks / Brotherhoods anywhere? Omar, his character in the circle, is an Obsidian, and he has designed his background around the Obsidian of the Delaris Mountains and have such a good relationship with the Rock Horn Moot. All information he has about this is from the Crystal Raiders 1st edition book, but as far as he can see, there is no mention of the name of the Life Rocks or the Brotherhood other than it exists.
Right.
So, is there a list anywhere? I don't think there is.
Not that I'm aware of. I think that is one of those things that in previous editions was left kind of vague for people to fill in those details as they wish. Even the Life Rocks that are mentioned. I think the only one that I can think of by name is Iodia, Omasu's life rock that the Triumph landed on. There might be a couple of others, like perhaps I know that in the Journey to Lang adventure that it was dealing with a corrupted life rock, and it might have a name that's mentioned. But for the most part, like
I just ran that one. I can't recall.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it in a while, so I don't recall either.
It's okay.
But it might not.
I was on it literally 3 weeks ago, but I don't remember. I don't remember one being.
It might not. I think that's one of those things that was left intentionally kind of vague, so that GMs could fill in what they needed, and we haven't felt any need to expand upon that thus far. So, no.
Yeah. I like the fact that it was left vague. It's one of those life rocks that exist. Most of the mountain ranges are named. Attach a name to it and go from there. So I created a Obsidian character many, many years ago. I gave him a last name, which is the name of his life rock. So in the Brotherhood, done the same thing. So I named it the Bittor, Bittor life rock, just because that was the name of that specific hill. I called it, and that was it, because I wanted that name to match my character. So I like that it was left vague, because people who play Obsidian characters can just fill those in. But that's me. So, Aaron, good question. He does say thanks for all the hard work we both put in. Josh more than me, but yes.
We put in work, Dan. Stop it.
I've put in some work. You put in more work than I do. Otherwise, next up is another Matthew. Not Matty S., but Matthew has a second one. Hello, guys. I had a situation that came up last night. I had a new player make a Tiskrang Nethermancer. One of the reasons he picked the race was the tail attack. He liked that he could cast a spell and still make an attack with his tail in the same round. When he was looking over the spells, he came across Spirit Grip. He was wondering about it since it is a touch spell. Could he cast it and then slap his opponent with his tail, doing both spell damage and unarmed attack damage? Think on that for a second, Josh. He thought about it and said, yes, how I handled it was to make an unarmed attack the ability to touch the target. If he misses the unarmed attack, the spell will not go off. If the unarmed attack was successful, then he would have to make a spellcasting test as the target's mystic defense. He says this could become overbalancing, but his thought process was that he was using his unarmed skill and his spellcasting at a -2 steps. So he thinks it evens out. Also, if he was successful, it would be 2 different damage tests. So it would make it more prone to deal wounds or knockdowns. Are we missing anything? Is he missing anything?
No, that's mostly fine. Again, like looking at the options, the only quibble that I have with that is requiring the successful unarmed attack to then be able to cast the spell. The intention behind touch range spells is only that you need to be within range that you could reach out and touch them, basically within melee range of the target. But there is not that the spell casting test itself represents your ability to get close enough for the spell to take effect. And if it fails, whether that's because you didn't touch them well enough or it just simply failed the same way that other spell castings might fail, that's fine. So certainly it is possible I would allow a Tiskrang spellcaster to both cast a spell and use tail attack, using the tail attack option, with the -2 as indicated for taking advantage of that.
Anything else?
So yes, you could cast the spell, and if successful, and also try and hit with the tail, and deal damage with either or both, depending on the results of the rolls. The only thing that I would say is that requiring a separate attack roll in order to allow them to cast the spell is intentionally not something that's required for magicians, because that then requires them to, there aren't that many touch range spells to begin with for enemies. Spirit Grip, I think, is one of the few. Most of the touch range spells are really for allies, in which case it's not going to come into play. But the idea being that, you would then require any magician who wants to have a touch range spell to also have a decent dexterity and or take unarmed combat in order to be able to touch someone. And that kind of gets around the trade-off against more martial melee types who typically will have a higher physical defense but a lower mystic defense. That the magician can then overcome because they're casting spells as opposed to trying to hit them. So that's the only part of all of that I would really have problems with. I am not sure from his question whether the player wanted to try and cast the touch spell using his tail rather than like reaching out with his hand, but he was trying to hit him with the tail and cast the spell through the tail as the touch. That would be a case where I would be less inclined to allow them to both cast the spell and do the unarmed. But even in that case, at that point, like, you're still allowing the spell and the tail attack as two separate tests, each at a -2. If you want to skin that or narratively present that as I am casting the spell through my tail, how is that different from I hit him with my tail and reach out with my hand? From as long as you're handling the mechanics the same way, narratively, I don't think it makes a problem. And so that if one is successful and the other isn't, you either didn't get the spell off or didn't hit them well enough to actually cause any damage. But I would not have the ability to cast the spell require them to successfully hit.
Fair. As long as you're consistent from here on out the exact same way, as long as you maintain the consistency, to Josh's point over numerous episodes in the past, as long as you're consistent for anybody who wants to do that, then you should be fine. Because you'll have plenty of chances for other people to poke holes in that method. So, to be clear, it would be a declaration of a tail attack in the same round that you're going to cast a spell. And then everything is at a -2. So the casting spell is at a -2 spell casting, and the tail attack is at a -2 to roll to hit. That's it. Okay.
Right. I've got my book here right now real quickly. I want to double check something.
Take your time. We can edit out the dead
Looking at combat options. See specifically, tail attack makes an additional... So technically, tail attack allows an additional attack in close combat.
It is a -2 to all.
Which one could argue would not allow spell casting because that is not a close combat attack. But for a touch spell, I would allow it.
I was going to say the same thing. That was the only...
It seemed like...
Only caveat I would add on to that.
Technically, as written, it's not something that's intended, but I would still... Like, it applies the -2 penalty to all tests, Yeah. Okay. So,
as long as it's a touch spell only, I will allow it.
Well, I could even potentially see where, like, you're casting a ranged spell at one target and tail attacking another, but at that point, you're starting to get into the territory like you have with multiple attacks and whatnot, and that starts to seem a little bit hinky. So, but I can definitely see people based on the wording of the rule making the argument that no, you can't make a spell, you can't cast a spell and tail attack because you couldn't say, for example, cast a spell and use like second weapon or something along those lines. Because spell casting is not a close combat attack. That is, it's not against physical defense. But, I don't think it's that big a deal.
Yeah. Like I said, I would just put a limit on it, and my only limit would be touch spell, tail attack is the only combination I'll allow. Otherwise, it's one or the other, not both. But that's just me. Just for some game balance so that person's not hogging, all the combat dice rolls. But that's just me. So otherwise, he thanks us for the podcast. And Matthew, we thank you for listening. So let us know how that goes and if you find us off base. So other than that, it brings us to our last one of the day. Really. Yes. This is Kagorsi. Third or fourth email in. I'm not entirely sure. Probably the fourth. But it is, of course, in character. So allow me and indulge me if you possibly will. Greetings, Dan and Josh. I speak to you today with the scribe at hand after a most glorious day. Getting to hear the show where you finally discuss orcs has made me the most proud orc in all of Barsafe. The feeling it brought was like that of the Gahad washing over you in battle, plus the added excitement of seeing a double rainbow. I must thank Dan for making my name a part of your language and spreading my legend far beyond the lands in which I inhabit. If I die in my old age now, at least I will be happy. I still am feeling strong in mind and body, so perhaps I will still be here when you discuss important topics like Carafad and the Legends of Swordmasters, which only use two-handed weapons. Keep up the good work. We will. Okay. I did feel I should be at a loss for words after listening to the show, but of course I am not, because I am an orc. My questions this week are thus. Are you sure about those 10 rules to being an orc? My tribe has made peace with our neighbors, and perhaps it is the humans among us, but we like to bathe every once in a while. Bathing seems to increase your chances with the ladies of the other name-giver races. Do not tell the other orcs this secret, please. Most of the other stuff was agreeable, though. Will you discuss Obsidian soon? Asked
We already
and
talked
answered.
about that.
Yep. We have never had one in the village. I've seen none the few times I have been to larger cities, and the discussions about Obsidipoop has me intrigued. I notice I have, up to this point, been a little self-centered in what topics I have been interested in, and obsidian seems something I would like to know more about. I am certainly glad I do not frequent any establishment that would have a half-ton name-giver leaving the kiddies at the pool. No offense to the very large and very strong name-givers, which may really, really, really have to go number 2. Do the Muckers Guild members cry at the mere thought of it? Ha! In all seriousness, we are clueless about these things in my village. Do they eat rocks? Whole dyers? Trees? Why do they have men in their name if they aren't? And none of their other name givers have men in them either, which seems notable. Do they grow beards? Any hair? I am sure I had more questions, but in my excitement they have been forgotten. Keep up the great work, and I will speak to you again soon. Kogorsi. P.S. The scribe will talk with you later. He is tired, and much like if he were an orc, it is unwise to prod him when he would be like to be sleeping.
So we'll get to the Obsidian stuff in the Obsidian episode. Those
Yes.
are all great questions. And we will endeavor to answer them when the time is right.
I don't know if we'll cover the Muckers Guild at Obsidian at the time. But
probably not.
probably not. I can tell you right now, no hair, don't grow beards. There you are.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 freebies right now.
The 10 rules are in the essay that was granted to the Great Library, or that was provided to the Great Library for their Name Givers of Barsave series.
And I think I actually omitted 2 of them because they were on the next page, but still, the main 8 were the fun ones.
But now that is not something, because none of the races, none of the Name Givers in Earthdawn are monocultures. It may be that it was just that the tribe and culture that particular scribe was talking to had those rules, and that is not necessarily the case for orcs everywhere. So, yes, we are sure about those rules, but no, they do not necessarily apply to
unilaterally
everybody.
No, but they are fun. So they're just nice little role-playing things to throw in there if you can get them done that way. So. Anyway, thank you, everybody. By all means, we did not actually give our email address out at the beginning of the podcast. So if you've made it this long and we haven't bored you to death and you want us to answer your question,
EDSG podcast at gmail.com.
There you go. And the sweet
we actually just before we started recording had 2 more emails show up. We will push those off to another episode.
Fair.
But because we already had a bunch that we were doing for this one. So we will save those for another time, but we certainly appreciate the emails from everybody and the feedback, and it lets us know that people are listening and enjoying, and above and beyond the simple,
great job
number ticks that we see on our website.
Yeah, and we love hearing we're doing a great job. Thank you, everybody. We don't think we've had any complaints so far. But no, we're here to answer your questions. I love getting questions that are just outside the normal scope of things.
Actually, we did get one sort of complaint.
Uh-oh. It's about me, isn't it?
No, it's not, actually. It was about... It's actually about me. It was basically wondering why I don't prep more.
Josh doesn't need to prep.
Why I am often, this was they had listened to the previous episode where I was going on and basically off the top of my head talking about the stuff with regards to group patterns. And he's like, why don't you do more prep instead of always going, well, as I recall and to the best of my recollection and stuff like that?
Because 9 times out of 10, when Josh is recalling, I'm sitting here with the book open in my hand and I'm following along going, nope, Josh got that right. Josh got that one wrong. And I can steer him just in case. But 9 times out of 10, Josh is schooling me and I'm holding the book.
I will say that it is a fair question because I recognize that I largely come to this to, without a lot of prep, certainly not scripted by any stretch of the imagination. As anybody who has listened to one of my rambling 15-minute digressions about stuff will attest. But
I edit those down to 12.
Part of it is we kind of have a plan about the various topics we're going to cover. And if it's one that I am not as sure on, I will do a little bit of brushing up ahead of time. But part of it is just style. I prefer to have a more conversational, less polished style for the show. And I think that's something that we're shooting for. And also, prep is time that takes me away from working on other awesome Earthdawn stuff. If I have to spend, in addition to just not only the recording, but the post-production, if I have to then add pre-production for research and prep work and whatnot, I am sure enough of most of my off the top of my head recollections to go, and like Dan said, he has the books handy to correct me if I am wrong. And it is why there are times where I have had to go back and say, I said something that was ill-conceived. That would no longer happen if I prepped. I don't know. People can. We
have stated corrections, and again, I've had to go back and do my pre-production ahead of time just to keep up with Josh because, again, I'm sitting here with the book and he's schooling me on what I used to know about Earth Dawn because I have said numerous times I have forgotten more than most people will learn. That most people does not include Josh because he lives and breathes this literally every day working on all the Earth Dawn projects. He doesn't need to do a lot of show prep. I do, but he doesn't.
It depends on what we're talking about.
Totally. We both have already said when we talk about the geographical issue of the city of Kratos, we both need to go back and reread that book.
Which is why we haven't done it yet.
It's been a while. Exactly. We're going to talk about Travar not today, but soon. And I'm, a third of the way through the new book just because, and I've gotten all the geography stuff down. I have notes on it. But I know for a fact Josh is going to school me.
Whereas I edited the book. And so there are many aspects of that I will be able to recall when you bring them up. But yes, it's a fair assessment. And basically, why don't I prep more? Because I don't wanna.
And you don't need to.
Maybe most of the time. Most of the time.
You don't need to.
Maybe I should a little bit more. Anyway.
It's okay. Well, today, the last topic we're going to talk about, because we've killed a half an hour or so, is circling up. Since we've given a lot of GM advice in the last email section here, we have some player advice and what to do with your legend points when you finally get them and exactly where you should spend them. So this is exactly how to get to the next circle in Earth Dawn when you get some legend points and a stack load of them.
Yeah, really. There's a bunch of stuff that you can spend legend points on.
Exactly.
First and most obvious are increasing your talent ranks, because that is what defines your discipline and what allows you to advance your circles in your discipline, and
it's what defines your circle.
Therefore get access to more talents and the cool abilities and stuff like that we've talked about in the various discussions.
And it's what defines your new circle. Having a certain number of talents at a certain rank is your new circle. So that's kind of the requirement you have to have there. In previous editions, were there both methods? Because I'm going back for anybody who's trying to convert from classic or first edition to now, 4th edition. I know the using all talents to advance option we've mentioned before casually that was
similar to, well, it's more or less a very, very similar progression to the original 1st and 2nd edition and classic advancement scheme. That is the one that had where each discipline had, like, all of the talents were fixed and available for each discipline at particular circles. And in order to advance, you needed to have a certain number at a certain rank, with at least one of them being from a particular circle.
Yeah, so usually like the last circle you just had.
When 3rd edition fully...
knew that chart well.
Yeah. When 3rd edition fully implemented the talent options paradigm, sort of that change in how disciplines worked in terms of what was available to them, the number of talents, like the discipline talents, that is the fixed talents that were available at each circle, were assigned as the ones that needed to be advanced in order to progress through your circles. Uses the same number of talents and things that previous editions did. It just basically said, okay, these are the only ones that are going to advance. So, in one sense, the new system allows a little bit more flexibility of your character customization because you have that optional talent at each circle that you can choose to help define or steer what style of that discipline you're going to be. Like, are you going to be, for the Swordmaster, are you going to be more of a social type, or are you going to be more of a combat type, for example? Among the many other options that we've talked about for the other disciplines. But because the talents that needed to be advanced in order to qualify for your new circle were the same for all members of the discipline. There is also a certain amount of similarity that you're going to see across all of the adepts of a particular discipline. So all sword masters would have the same 5 talents from first circle at, whatever rank they are based on their circle. And so that basically you're still going to see the same kind of core abilities from a discipline. Just the X factor, the customization is going to be in the little extra tricks and style that kind of go along with that. So those are the kind of the 2 advancement schemes. If I were to actually be running a long-term campaign myself right now, I probably would lean towards doing the all talents to advance option. Just to give that extra little bit of advancement flexibility for the players to really do what they want to do for their characters.
Yeah. It's mostly what I have known being a character over the last 20 years is the all talents to advance option, because I usually just get all of my talents to the same rank. And then, oh, look, I'm a new circle. Ta-da! And then again, when I have to go up again and get more points, all talents to the same rank. Ta-da! I'm on another circle. So it just makes life easy. But in 4th edition, I think this is mathematically quicker. Correct me if I'm wrong, Josh. You know the math behind this. All your only requirements are that the character must have raised his discipline talents to a minimum rank.
Right.
And you must train with a higher circle member of your discipline.
In one sense, the advancement is easier to present in the 4th edition talent option and 3rd edition paradigm, because it's basically you need to advance these talents, your discipline talents, which are the ones that are fixed at each circle. You need to raise them to this point to advance. There's no longer the added steps from the old style one of you need to have a certain number of talents, because it's possible. Let's say that you've got under the old system a character who was 4th circle and was going for 5th. They need to have 8 talents at rank 5 in order to qualify for 5th circle. One of those must be a 4th circle talent. But what you could do was, they didn't have to be 5 first, 1 second, 1 third, 1 fourth, the way that it is.
You're correct. Look at the chart.
Under the other system. It could be, because of the talents that you had available and what you decided to put your points into, you could have it be, both of your 4th, both of your 3rd, both of your 2nd, or 3 of your 2nd, depending on your discipline. If you're looking at the old one where some disciplines had 3 talents at 2nd circle. But and then not any of your 1st. I mean, that would be weird, because usually the talents you're getting at 1st circle are your bread and butter, and you're likely to have them higher anyway. And you've already had to raise them to a certain point to get to previous circles. So typically you tend to see the same, the talents that you are using being the ones that you advance. But it's possible that as long as you meet this certain number at this rank, and one of them must be from this circle, you can kind of shift around your focus and where you're putting your points as things go along.
Totally. Under that system, I had people I really need to get very, very good at my unarmed combat or my armed or my melee weapons. And they put 4 or 5 or 6 ranks in those as soon as they could and left everything else alone. They didn't go up circles, but they were really great at second.
Second circle. you can still do that now. There's nothing that prevents a character from doing that now. If you have, the points available and you're not looking necessarily to advance in circle as quickly as possible. You could definitely see a spellcaster would want to maybe focus on spellcasting and thread weaving to get really, really good.
Yeah.
The problem, the thing that you sort of tend to run into is that you are spending, is that because of the way the cost chart advances with its Fibonacci series, where, the ranks get progressively more and more expensive as you advance.
Yep.
The number of legend points that you are earning, go back to our discussion from last week, are kind of incentivize kind of being a bit more balanced in terms of how you progress. So, I mean, you can spend your points wherever you want, but to get back to our original point as we kind of sidetracked here into a discussion of historical advancement methods.
What? No!
The first thing that you generally would be looking to spend your legend points on are increasing your talent ranks, because those are your bread and butter.
Yeah. So under 4th edition, technically, let's say someone's going to go from 4th circle to 5th circle. They've left every single optional talent at rank 1, because all they have to do is raise their discipline talents from rank 4 to rank 5.
Or they might not have even, they could potentially even not have put any ranks into their optional talents at all.
Exactly. So all you
if
have
they
to,
want to. There's nothing that requires you to take those.
No, just saying. I'm just giving an example. Let's say they picked up all their talents, but they left all their options at rank 1, because whatever. But every discipline talent is now rank 4. They're going to put them all to rank 5, spending the thousands of legend points that's going to cost. Ta-da, your 5th circle. You still have a bunch of talents at rank 1, but you are officially 5th circle because all of your discipline talents are now rank 5.
Right.
Okay.
You have displayed enough proficiency in the things that are important to your discipline that your trainer agrees to induct you into the higher mysteries of the journeyman tier.
And there you go. So that's the major difference, is you can leave a lot of things at rank 1 in 4th edition as long as your discipline talents are the proper rank. And the classic version, for lack of a better term, the former version.
You could do the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do the same thing again, as long as you meet the requirements, however you might meet them.
Yes.
Then you can advance.
There you are. So that's the major thing. So really, when you've got all those legend points, as to Josh's point, I always do my talents first as well, just because, I want to get a new circle because there's new stuff.
No. Yeah, because it allows you to advance your circle. It gives you new stuff. It makes you better at the stuff that you're going to be doing most of the time anyway.
My durability goes up.
It's also easiest.
Yes, and my durability
to advance
goes up.
those, because it's just, your durability goes up when you advance a circle.
Yeah.
But it's easiest to advance your talents because you just need to spend the day hanging out meditating.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to pay a trainer. You don't need to do any kind of dedicated special work or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like you do if you were, say, trying to advance a skill, where you need to get taught by somebody and then spend some time sort of, practicing. And so you need to pay both the legend points to advance, but also spend a lot more time.
And coin.
And coin. Or advancing attributes, which use a similar sort of thing where there is some time constraint placed on them in order to advance.
Yep.
And, paying for training and tutoring as applicable for those. Talents are the easiest and most cost-effective,
most beneficial,
way
really,
of just increasing your character's abilities.
Yeah. So that's how to go up a circle, essentially. Where else should people be spending their legend points after they get them? And after you raise your talents up enough, what do you have left over? You've got a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 left over. You can raise your attributes.
Yeah, you can raise attributes.
And I think we've talked a little bit about breakpoints and attributes earlier.
Yeah. You can only, raise an attribute value up to 3, and it's a little bit pricey, very relatively speaking, early on to do that.
Yeah, 800 points initially.
800, 1,300, and 2,100 are the costs for each additional point. So if you take all 3, that also raises up that attribute value by a step, which increases the die, which is great if you have talents that are associated with it, because that.
But sometimes it's cost effective to spend those 800 points to
but
get that
there
extra
are also,
one
depending on the attribute, places
step,
where
and that just cascades
you might get
through
a
the
defense
rest of your
bonus,
talents.
or if you're increasing toughness or mystic armor bonus, or if you're increasing your toughness, every point that you increase gives you a little bit of additional death and unconsciousness rating. And potentially, depending on where you are in the progression, might get an extra recovery test or a slightly higher wound threshold. So there are places that you can look at on the table and see, based on your initial, on your point distribution, where it might be most worthwhile for you to put some points initially. And this is something that you can maybe keep in the back of your mind when you're initially building your character, when you're putting the attribute values in and going, I can't get this quite as high as I want, but if I go 1 point lower, I can get this where I want, and then I can put my first attribute raise into this and actually get everything.
Which I did. I did that when I built I'm playing a 4th edition Scout, and I came up 1 point short on getting the next step on my dexterity. And to scouts, that's kind of important. So
it's an important attribute.
I took my first 800 points, put them in my dexterity, and most of my talents just bumped up a whole another step. And that is a lot cheaper to do with 800 points than it is to spend all of that on every talent I had.
Right. Yeah. That is definitely something to look at. Now, broadly speaking, in terms of cost effectiveness, attribute values, especially if you're looking at needing to spend 2 or even all 3 of the raises for that attribute in order to get the step.
Yeah.
At that point, you're probably, that's something that you have when you are in your, when you're 7th or 8th circle or even higher, and you're looking at the individual cost of talent ranks being more than you would spend on the attribute raise increases. And maybe at that point, it would be worthwhile, more cost effective from a legend point spending standpoint to put the points into there. If you're 7th circle and you're looking to buy rank 8 in a talent, that costs more than
3,400 points. Yeah.
Yeah. That costs more than 2 attribute raise points, even if there is some money and time consideration there that wouldn't be in place for a talent. So, again, like group patterns, like we talked about, there comes a point where the benefit that you can get from them in terms of the mechanical advantage becomes really cost effective at a certain point. Similar to how a second discipline in earlier editions, because of the way that the math worked on that, became really, really attractive at a certain point, because the cost that it was involved in terms of gaining that second discipline and advancing all of the talents that you didn't already have, you could get a lot of new stuff up very, very quickly. Compared to the advancement that you would be seeing in your primary discipline. And so it became mathematically incentivized, even if narratively it wasn't something that was supposed to be particularly common.
So we have talent increases, we got attribute increases. Clearly, you can, of course, up a skill.
Skills, yeah. I mean, skills
but
are,
they're a little more costly because they take more time. But
a little bit more costly. They take a little bit more time. They take a little bit more legend points comparatively. But it can be nice to pick up some useful things, even if you're only picking up 2 or 3 ranks in them, to have them, either things that might be talent options for you, for your discipline, but you want to take something else for some reason.
Yeah.
Or picking up things that aren't in your discipline toolkit at all.
Makeup.
That would also be useful. Like, for example, with Virag, my Nethermancer, I took awareness as a talent, as a skill, rather than picking up as a talent, even though it is a talent option for Nethermancers, because there was just other talents that I wanted more, basically, and I could spend the legend to get a couple of ranks in awareness. And my goal is not to be the scout or the person who notices stuff, but to just put a couple of points in there to have, right now, step 8, 2d6 for my perception, so that, I have a chance of noticing some things, but it's not something that I would be making my focus, which would not be the case if I were, say, a scout or a thief who, would definitely be looking, or an archer who would definitely be looking to have awareness be a much more higher priority. Climbing.
Totally. I made my fourth edition scout, and I knew we were starting with a party of 3 people. So I knew for a fact I was going to need an advantage, and so I took Avoid Blow as my first circle option, but I took Acrobatic Defense as a skill. And I'm like, I will put 2 ranks in that immediately.
Yeah.
So I can change my physical defense. Because I knew I was in a party of 3.
We talked about this sort of when you were creating a character. Those novice tier skills, some of those can be handy to get those free points into early on. But it's something to look at in the future. It can be a handy thing to have. I mean, other useful skills for any kind of wandering adventurer type to have. Climbing. Wound balance, I think, is available as a skill and can be worthwhile to have a couple of extra points into that. Swimming, like any kind of skill that would be handy to have a little bit in if you run into a situation where you are screwed if you don't. Yep. So those sorts of things, another good thing. Again, when you get into higher circles and you get into, journeyman.
Yes, wound balance is available as a novice skill.
When you get into journeyman tier and those talent ranks and stuff start being a little bit more expensive, picking up a couple of ranks of skills, especially if you've got the downtime and the money to handle it, is definitely something to look into. Another thing you can spend your points on, for magicians at least, are spells, because spells do cost legend points in 4th edition for reasons that we have discussed elsewhere.
We got time.
Yeah. Well, basically, that the versatility that spells bring to the table, that basically it just from a game balance standpoint, makes...
We treat them like talent knacks.
Yeah, treat them a little bit like talent knacks, and...
Which, We'll talk about talent knacks in a future episode.
Yeah. But that is something else that you can spend legend points on. It's talent knacks.
Yeah. So we'll hold on to that one. But that's another thing to spend legend points on is actually taking a look at knacks, because I think you can't even get knacks until you have a talent at a rank of 3, and then you can start looking at knacks.
There are a couple of spellcasting knacks available to magicians that become available, I think, at 2, maybe at 1.
Fair.
I forget off the top of my head.
It's okay. We'll prep for that show, actually.
Yeah.
We'll prep for the knacks
we'll
show.
Look at that. So
we'll prep for that one.
Yeah. And then at that point, so to get back to broader advancement, when you've got your talents at the correct number of talents, your discipline talents at a certain rank, then you go out and you find a trainer of your discipline. They have to be a higher circle than you. Mm-hmm. You work out some kind of arrangement. Usually you pay them money to train you, and you spend some time training, and once you are done, you are initiated into the new circle of the discipline, and you gain access to your new discipline talent and have a new option slot that you can fill, and there's more things that you can now spend legend points on. Something else that you can spend legend points on, we talked about this last week, threads in general, but like group pattern threads. If you want to use or take advantage of a threaded magical item, you need to spend legend points to weave those threads.
Yes.
Have we talked about thread items and learning them and using them?
No.
Yet?
That's slated.
We will
soon.
talk about that in the future.
That's slated soon. My only other
33
question...
episodes, I'm losing track of what we have talked about.
Again, Josh lives and breathes this more often than I do, but I try to keep him on track. We got a few minutes before we hit the hour mark. I figure we can probably squeeze in about 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes on legendary status.
Oh,
Since we're talking about legend points and how to use them and how they accumulate. This is your running odometer on your car.
Yeah, so
legendary status.
You really, generally speaking, you should be tracking 2 different values when you have your legend points, when you get an award.
Yes.
One is your total legend. That is how many legend points you have earned over the course of your adventures from the beginning. And this is a number that just keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and can sort of be equivalent to, like, experience point total in
mileage on your car.
Yeah, or experience in D&D. Like, it just keeps going up and whatnot.
Always.
Where then you've also got the other aspect of that is your current legend, which is how many points you actually have available to spend to raise talents and things like that. That is more akin to games like the World of Darkness games, or any other game where you earn experience that is then spent to advance your abilities.
This is your trip meter on your tank of gas that you reset when you get a tank of gas.
We'll go with that. That's fine.
I've used that analogy for 25 years and nobody's ever been confused.
I'm not confused by it.
I'm
not confused by it. I don't follow. Anyway, so you have these 2 values, and so your current legend basically determines what you are able to do in terms of raising talents and weaving threads and learning skills and all of that stuff. Your total legend points is, roughly speaking, a measure of your overall fame, your overall notoriety, how likely it is for people to have heard of you, for stories of you to have been circulated elsewhere. And
I love the use of the word
renown. Yeah. Your renown. And this is separate from a little bit separate from whatever reputation you might have for people that you have actually worked with and worked for in the course of your adventures or dealt with, because they will actually know you as opposed to having heard stories. But when your total legend points reach certain thresholds, you get bonuses to interaction tests with people who have heard of you, and something else that I am now forgetting. Prep. I know there are 2 things that are on the chart, and I'm trying to call to mind, and I even got the PDF up here, but I don't have it on the right page.
I was going to say, because I remember the old chart used to be legendary status, you only ever get to 5.
Right.
And it used to be a limit of like 10,000, 25,000, like
1 million,
40,
I think, was the top level. I'm flipping to the page.
Way up there. Remember the first 2 were 10,000 and 25,000. And then I think the next one was like 100.
It's okay.
But it was, way up there.
Gotcha. Okay.
New chart.
Renown. You mentioned it and I forgot what it was. Renown is basically the difficulty number for people to roll a test against to see if they have heard of you.
So if you utter the phrase, "Don't you know who I am?" This is what they get to roll on.
So I'm looking at the chart here now. If you have 10,000 or fewer legend points, your renown difficulty is 16, which is that's kind of high, and you get no reputation bonus. And generally speaking, outside of the people that you have directly interacted with, nobody's heard of you. Once you break the 10,000 point mark, but less than 100,000, your renown difficulty goes down to 12. But for anybody who has heard of you, you get a +2 bonus to any interaction test that you make with them because of the reputation that you have earned and the fact that they have heard of you. Now, you know, odds are that it's only people in sort of the biggest cities that might have heard of you, places where the news would circulate through more frequently. Mm-hmm. But you can take advantage of that.
Word of mouth spreads.
Over 100,000 up to 1 million, your renown difficulty drops even further down to 9. You get a +4 bonus to interaction tests. And at that point, your name is likely to be recognizable to most people, even if they might not know a lot of details. But, oh, yes, I have heard of you. And then once you get more than 1 million, your renown difficulty drops to a 7, which basically means everybody has heard of you and has heard stories true or made up about you. And you get a +6 bonus to your reputation. To your reputation bonus to any in your action tests. You are at that point, you are a living legend. Dread Pirate Roberts, to grab a pop culture reference, is someone who has a renown of 7. Only using that as a recognition of that as somebody that everybody has heard of. We're going to set aside the whole, well, how does that work in Earthdawn, where it's actually different people that are the Dread Pirate Roberts, and how does that work? That is a completely separate issue. We're not going to go there. But that's the sort of thing, right? These are these celebrities. These are the name recognition. Mm-hmm. You know, in the tier right below that 100,000 to 1 million range, that is, you are a celebrity within a particular like subculture. Like people who follow Swordmasters, like people who follow and know about Swordmasters will know the slightly less famous Swordmasters. But for example, the renown scores, right? If you are meeting somebody of your discipline, they could make a half magic test against that renown to see if they've heard of you. Because part of the half magic of all disciplines is to have knowledge and lore and information about other practitioners of their discipline. So that would be one example.
Yes.
So there's that sort of thing. Now, there is a downside that potentially comes with being famous, and that is that people will seek you out. If you are famous, people will, and you show up in a town, and people have heard of you as a famous adept, they will want you to solve their problems. And you may not want to, but you kind of need to, because that's what they expect of you.
Well, keep your appearances up, because otherwise bad rumors will begin to spread, and you'll need your interaction bonus to correct those rumors when presented with them.
So there's kind of all of that goes along with that. And adventuring groups kind of go along with that, and these don't necessarily need to be a true pattern group like we discussed last week. This could be any kind of group that works together and is known to travel together, can collectively, like the group would have a Gestalt renown score that is kind of based on the legend point fame of the members of that group.
Like the Redeemers of Sinnoh. As we brought up last week.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, you know, and that you don't necessarily need to be a named true pattern group. You can still be a group, you know, and gain fame for being that. You know, at that point, you're looking at things like Orc Mercenary Cavalries or, you know, other groups like that, you know, that might be famous for their deeds as a unit or as a company, that kind of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. The only thing we didn't actually cover was exactly how spells are purchased, which is, of course, you said legend points, but there was a really easy scale for that. It's whatever circle it is times 100 in legend points for the new spell you want to learn.
It costs
silver pieces.
That's the money cost is 100 times the circle.
That's the money cost.
The legend cost is equal to a novice tier talent of that rank. So if you're trying to learn a 5th circle spell, it costs whatever. It's 1,300 for rank 5 and a novice tier talent?
I think it's 200 to start, yeah.
Oh, 8. No, sorry. One
novice tier.
Right. So it's 800.
Yeah, novice tier talents are 100 apiece.
Yeah, rank 1 is, well...
And a 5th circle is...
Rank 1 is 100, rank 2 is 2, rank 3 is 3, rank 4 is 5, rank 5 is 8. 5. So a 5th circle spell would cost 800 legend. A 4th circle spell would cost 500. Gotcha. A 6th circle spell would cost 1,300. It's as if you are buying just that rank of a novice tier talent. which is similar
Cool.
to the way that Knacks are purchased, which is why the costs kind of are what they are. But yeah.
Fair enough. We had some internet issues there, so I couldn't hear Josh and he couldn't hear me, so we were both confused. That's why that sounded as weird as it did. Anyway, so we've covered exactly how and where and why you could spend your legend points in any way, shape, or form to get your character better.
Yes. There you go.
So, folks, yeah, if you have any questions for us on anything we did not cover today that you want to hear about, or if you want to correct us on something we should have prepped for, that's fine too. You can email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Any final thoughts on anything
Yes,
today,
we
Josh?
didn't actually go over this at the top of the show. We have a new Kickstarter.
All right.
We
buried the lead.
Teased it a little bit last week, but we announced the new book, Empty Thrones, which is a campaign setting book along the lines of Prelude to War, which is going to have, like, basically had the kickoff event of Uhl being dead is sort of the inciting event for the other story arcs that take place within that book. Kickstarter is going now, as of this recording. It launched 2 days ago. It launched on Monday, June 29th.
Yep.
This episode actually will have been up for about a week as of the time this episode goes live. About a week and a half. It funded in less than an hour the initial goal. We are edging up close to the second stretch goal here, only 3 days in.
But go get yours if you haven't already.
But go get it. It'll be linked in the show notes on Kickstarter, Empty Thrones. And like the other Kickstarters, opportunities to get other books if you haven't gotten any stretch goals, blah, blah, blah. So yes, that is going on right now.
Yeah. So if you can't find us on social media, and Josh will go through that litany here in a second or so, and if you can't email us, and if you haven't figured out the Kickstarter, you're not trying hard enough. But we'll be here for the duration. Where can people find you, Josh? It's been a while since we mentioned.
So we've got the Earthdawn Survival Guide Twitter account at EarthdawnG. We've got my own personal Twitter account at Mataxes, Mataxes. There is the Earthdawn Guild on Facebook, which I am in, and will occasionally chime in and ask comments and stuff. But there's a pretty decent group of folks over there. We've got the Facet Games Discord. We've got the Facet Games forums at facetgames.com, which also has the developers blog, which has posts going up every week or so talking about stuff. Plenty of places and such.
Yeah, if you can't find us, you're not trying. Otherwise, folks, it is time for you to go make your own legend. See you next time.
Good night, everybody.